Welcome to the Beyond Membership podcast, where we are uncovering what drives associations forward and how the suite of Momentive software products accelerates that momentum. So here we are again, and Rob, I hear you've just made it back from a very influential association event. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I actually haven't made it back, Jake. I'm still in LA. The ASAE conference, which is the kind of the premier event for our industry, took place basically Saturday through yesterday, Tuesday, and Momentive, not surprisingly, had a very large presence there. We had 2 booths this time. The big news for us there was we announced our data hub, which connects all of our software together and, sets us up to do, wonderful data analytics, and overlay an AI strategy on top of that. So big news there. And we also announced our new event offerings. So we're taking a lot of solutions and rebuilding them into one big product. And so we announced that as well. So it was very exciting. So we obviously are always pleased when all of our clients come and visit us. So we saw lots of great clients. And of course, we met a lot of new people that we hope will become clients. So I'm assuming you were holding down the fort while I was off gallivanting in LA.
I was. Maybe someday I'll get the very exclusive event invite for the ASAE event. We will see.
Well, we like to save you up to send you to wonderful events like Salesforce Dreamforce, which is where you can really take advantage of, your very exceptional skills there.
Yeah, I've been twice. That's a great event. I love that event. Well, as usual, we are in great company today. We have Nicole Adair from Salesforce, actually. Nicole, we always like to ask this. Tell us something interesting about yourself.
Oh my gosh, what is interesting about me? I'm a Colorado native and I live in Denver. And that's pretty rare around here, actually. We have lots of folks who come from other places and find their life here in Colorado. And so I'm a very proud native. And of course, we love anybody who wants to come enjoy our state, but it's rare to meet another fellow native. So every time we do, it's we have a little celebration.
Well, I actually married a Colorado native.
Did you?
And so we have a very special place in our heart. And it's not uncommon for her to say too much time has passed. We need to go back and visit her state of birth. So I think you're very lucky to be living there.
I agree. There's something here that feeds the soul in a way that other places don't, at least for me.
So it was really a pleasure, actually, Nicole. Your organization was actually at the conference as well.
Yes.
And your booth was right beside us. So I went over there and poked you a few times to ask you to make sure you were sending leads our way.
Of course. Yeah, it was actually really convenient to be right there because we were talking about, of course, the power of our platform, but to be able to give an example of things that are built on our platform and point over to you all was incredible and really fun to be all right there in the middle of the Salesforce action.
Of course, we're talking about Nimble AMS, my
Yes.
baby, so I've been working with Nimble AMS for a little over 10 years now, and it's been incredible. Actually, when I first arrived at Nimble AMS, I had no idea that Salesforce had all of those capabilities for you to build applications on top of it. And oftentimes when I meet with people, they also don't know, and then that's an opportunity to kind of educate about that. It's quite robust, very featureful, I'll say. Platform to build applications on top of.
One of the things it's great is that, obviously Jake and team can really focus on building association specific technology. We inherit so much from the foundation that we can, provide to our clients. So it really, it eliminates a lot of things like, security and process flows that we don't have to build those technologies, that we just inherit them and use them, which allows us to move faster.
You took the words out of my mouth. I would say maybe 9 out of 10 conversations I had with folks at ASAE annual were about that. They came up and said, "Hey, tell us why you're here. This is our first year sponsoring and our first year having a booth." And so many of my conversations were about distinguishing Salesforce as a platform, right, that gives you all those capabilities of automation, the ability to write flows and create great processes within your organization, the security, the ability to have AI. And that's something, that Salesforce has embraced from the very beginning as being that platform, that strong foundation that you can build other things on. And so, more of my conversations were about that than anything else, just sort of educating about the difference between, having a platform that is incredibly extensible and flexible instead of, some of the sort of what we would call point solutions that are, built on a proprietary software that sometimes is, incurs tech debt because it's not as flexible as building on a platform that is platform first. And, that's really our philosophy as a company.
Now, the other reason you were at ASE is you had a session. In fact, it was a very special highlighted session. It was during the pre-conference workshops, I believe. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we had a session. We had the privilege of speaking to about 150 people before the big conference started, on Saturday. And we were talking about how to get your data ready for AI, because as we, talk to, and I'm sure you hear this too, and is why you're, creating Data Hub and other things, is that associations are gathering a lot of data. They have a lot of data that's coming in from all directions. And we find that association executives a lot of times are thinking about how they use that more strategically. And of course, with the pressure and opportunity that's coming around artificial intelligence, data is such a critical foundation for making that work in a way that's really going to be successful for your organization. We thought that would be an important topic to cover and just have some conversations around too. We had some time for folks in the room to talk to each other and break out into conversations. So I thought it was really fruitful, and we got some great feedback from folks that were there, and it was really fun.
What sort of questions did you get? Do you have any highlights in terms of what people were asking about?
Yeah. So we had a couple of customers there too who spoke about sort of their transformation in thinking about data and using solutions within association organizations. And they got the best questions, I think, which were a lot of things. One thing we highlighted in our session was the process, right? The people, the process, the technology around transformation. And they got a lot of great questions about how to get buy-in from your organization, right? So when you're undergoing these big transformations or working on something that touches everything in the enterprise, like data, how you get everybody on board and what are some of the challenges around that? Because humans are sometimes very afraid of change. And so they talked a lot about how they created adoption around some of the ideas that they were bringing to the table, really socialized change early. And, the things that you hear about that are really effective in change management, like making sure that there's executive buy-in. So that's coming from, the top down and the bottom up, so that you have champions on both ends of that spectrum that can bring that together in the most effective way. So that was one question that they both got, and, talking about that experience. And then I think the other big question that was on everybody's mind is, where do they start? If you're wanting to look at your data and do some assessments around data readiness, where do you start? And we talked about several use cases that come up for organizations as a place to start. So we talked about using a use case. So what's something that's giving you pain in your organization right now that you want to solve you feel it could be easier? And, we talked about how you start with that. Okay. Think about, let's say your use case is you want the ability for members to renew more easily, right? So we talked about what's the kind of data that you need to have access to in order to do that more effectively? Who are the people that need to be in place, and what access to that data do they have? So we kind of used use cases to go through some of those ideas around people, process, and technology to get people thinking about where to start.
Yeah, I find I find the questions that I get oftentimes are a lot having to do with like practical advice. So
Yeah.
it definitely sounds like something like, where do I get started, seems super relevant. I like, to me as a technologist, a lot of times when I hear like, oh, get your data ready for AI or like clean up your data, I think about like deduping and getting rid of corrupt records and making sure everything is relevant. And then, like you were saying, thinking through use cases. Uh, that use case of obviously wanting to get your members to renew is really important. So what would you care about? Like
Mm-hmm.
how they could pay for the renewal? How are they getting how are you communicating to them about the renewal? And maybe that's kind of the beginning to how you uncover what you should actually be doing with your data.
Yeah. And I'm sure, Jake, you see this too when you're doing product development, having user stories. I don't know if you use those, but
Yep.
that it's kind of the same idea of having like, what does somebody need to be able to do? And then how do we enable them to do that in the easiest and most efficient and impactful way that we can?
Right. And for our listeners, right, like a user story, it's like thinking about any given person in their role wants to accomplish a thing. What do they need to be able to do that? And there's actually a syntax for how you write them, but yeah, that's exactly kind of where I was at with what I was thinking is, and I think the renewal one's great, but there's a lot in the association space for what you might, how you might structure a use case around a goal that you want to get or some value you want to get out of your data.
Right.
Well, one of the things that I thought was interesting is that, like about a year ago, all the sessions as it related to AI were really focused around just getting data governance in place or getting your governance process related to what you would allow AI to do for your organization. And this year, I saw a total transformation that it seems like most organizations are way beyond that. And now what people are really talking about are the use cases where they can really apply these technologies. And so I was in one session in particular, and one of the speakers was from the Foundry Association, which has been around apparently since the 1890s or something. And what foundries do is, they do things like melt metal and then create things from that. So there's very specific research and science around, what temperatures things need to do and, the way to keep people safe. And so they have a mass amount of information related to that topic. And so they've used these tools to now it used to be that someone could go online and go in almost like it was a library and search for something. Now you can just simply ask a question to the information and it provides the answer back and then all the citations from the research. And so it's, a tremendous member benefit for them. And of course they were smart enough to set it up so they would give a non-member a teaser. And then if the person wants to really proceed and use the tool, then they have to join as members. But that was just a perfect use case. And of course, there were lots and lots of questions about how you got started, what technology you were using, what kind of things did you have to watch out for, support and maintenance. Are you doing this yourself? Are you hiring a third party? These are all important questions to ask, and that that's what makes these conferences great, is when people can start sharing that information.
Yeah, I agree. And I love how you said the evolution sort of year over year, right? Last year, I feel like we were just starting to talk about like the real practical applications around AI. And now, as people are coming in this year, they've got AI policies in place for their organizations. We're seeing real examples of how it's been tested and working in organizations, like what you were just sharing, Rob. And part of that is just the pace at which things are changing is incredible. And so I find that exciting and also challenging for some of the organizations we're talking to who feel like maybe they don't have the capacity to, do things like the example you were sharing. And so I think it's really important that we have those practical conversations, because sometimes it's not as hard as they may have built it up in their head, right? And so having use cases to ground those conversations in and examples that other organizations are sharing is so incredibly helpful for people to start wrapping their heads around what it might look like for their organization. So that's a great example.
Yeah, and you can imagine like a lot of various trade-based organizations having a similar data set as the Foundry Society does. And I could think of a dozen off the top of my head right now who are Nimble AMS customers and probably have the similar thoughts or similar goals. And there's no, like, you can keep it simple too. For the last 5-10 years, we've been hearing about wanting AI or insights or what have you. And it usually stops there. And you're like, okay, so what do you want it to do? And that's when organizations may start realizing they hadn't thought through that side of it yet. Now I feel like we're finally rounding that corner. And we are seeing organizations and individuals even thinking more specifically about what they want to get out of AI. And that's breeding these better conversations because you're actually getting somewhere.
Well,
now.
and this again allows associations an opportunity to remind their members as well as the greater community of why they're really valuable. Because one of the things that I think many people are concerned about as it relates to AI is the data trusted? And associations are the trusted source that owns this information. And so the Foundry did it exactly right by, providing the information, providing the scientific, certification on all of the information they were providing. And I think that there's many associations that will, like you're saying, Jake, have valuable information like this that they can make more readily available and be providing at a time when people are really questioning the validity of information they're seeing online. And so I think it's actually a great time for associations and gives them the time to reassert their very important position in our society.
Right. And I mean, in general, too, it's like a tool that helps you do more with less. I can't think of a more analogous phrase for associations of doing more with less. I think that's right on par with kind of what their message is. I think every person I've met that's worked for an association wears so many different hats and is doing so many different things for the organization. This can really, like, this technology just at its core can just really help them. And of course, it can help their members, as you were mentioning as well. I think that is very poignant about you can get a lot of hallucinations, let's just say, from AI. It may tell you things that are not necessarily true. I don't know if you guys have seen any of the kind of funny is maybe relative, but legal faux pas that AI has now been a part of where they're just making up case references and stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's just like you were saying, Rob, this is a really interesting way for associations to kind of lean in and provide validity on some of that information and be a more trusted source.
Yeah. And that's a great point too, Jake, around, part of the sort of platform play, if you will, is that we want to build AI that is grounded in your organization's data, right? To avoid things like that. And what I mean by that is, if you have AI that's built into your solution, it will pull data from your business processes using your data business language. And then we can make sure that we're securely sending that out, a prompt out to get a response. And that response will come back grounded in that same language and with the knowledge of your business processes and even your brand as an organization. And so, that's really important so that we're avoiding things like hallucinations and we're avoiding things like people getting responses back that they don't trust. So that trust comes up, of course, all the time as we're talking about some of this new technology. And I also think, and I would love your thoughts. I might get a little philosophical here, but thinking about, this is maybe one of the first times in technological history, maybe that's a bit of a hyperbole, but where we have technology that is available to everyone, right? Everyone has tried some form, probably everyone, most people have tried some form of artificial intelligence, whether it's ChatGPT or some other form of that. And so I think it's so interesting that for the first time, people are coming with like this already inherent education about what this technology does. And so I'm just interested to see what that does to sort of the pace of people embracing this or not, right? Maybe, it's scary to them. And so I just think it's a really interesting time in our history, especially as technology professionals, to have this new tool that everybody has access to in some form, as we're thinking about how people can use it for their business. I don't know if you've thought or had conversations around that.
I certainly have. I mean, I would say it's very intriguing to me. I would say that I see two sides of it in my own personal life and professional life.
Yeah.
Mostly in the professional world, you see a lot of interest in utilizing the tool to do more. So, I'd say one of the best, most applicable use cases right now for AI is creating written text and revising written text over time. That's probably the most ubiquitous use case at this point. But
Right.
we're seeing pretty significantly, people get duped by AI videos. And so there's two sides to the coin, right? We can do a lot more. We can produce a lot more and take the whatever our personal and professional kind of goals are, and we can achieve them quicker. And some people, really, it's kind of who's adopting and who's not. Some people, if you're adopting, not only are you more protected against the downsides because you kind of can recognize when something is not real, you also get the benefit of progressing. And if you're not adopting, it's like the opposite. You're not progressing as fast as everyone, which means you're sort of being left behind a little bit. And there's almost like a fear element at this point to individuals who can't or won't use the technology, both from a perspective of, oh, there's all of this new content out there and I can't trust any of it, or I do trust all of it and holy crap, the world's a terrifying place because there's just all of this stuff going crazy, right? And then there's the the flip side of that where you can recognize the M dashes and everything, and when something is AI written, and then you just see everybody's using it. So I don't know. I see societal issues being exacerbated by AI, but I don't know if that negates the good sides of it.
Yeah,
I think that's a good way to say it, Jake, for sure. I feel very hopeful that these tools are going to be really valuable. And coming back to Nicole, where you started this, is I think it actually allows, it democratizes the ability to build solutions to people that would not have been able to conquer becoming a developer like yourself, Jake. And
Right.
and so somebody now who has a really solid liberal arts degree, very creative, a real thinker, can take a tool like one of these tools and build something real. And you keep hearing that they eventually expect that there's going to be a single person company who's going to build a billion dollar company. But I heard Jamie Dimon specifically say that everybody should, it doesn't matter what field you're in, you need to be using these tools, because if you can show yourself as proficient in them, you're going to be in high demand, and it does not require, his comment was, we used to tell everybody to go learn to program first and then go on whatever career you want. He says, we're not making that suggestion anymore. So I think it really democratizes the ability to pursue solutions that you couldn't have maybe before.
Yeah, I agree.
I totally am stealing this from someone. I'll give him a plug. It's Matt Addy, who also works for Nimble AMS. But he wrote me recently saying the difference in progress for programmers in the future is not who can build something the fastest or the best, but it's who knows what and why to build something. And I think that's a really good point, and I definitely think that's true. I mean, I think that's always been true technically, because eventually you level off a bit on, unless you're doing something really crazy like embedded systems on a missile or something, your ability to program really well is kind of a diminishing returns, I'll say. Whereas knowing why you're building something or when to build something is a much more meaningful skill and can really help you in your career. So I thought that was an interesting take, and I think it lines up with what you're saying, Rob.
Well,
Yeah.
I definitely think that the people already that we're seeing success, and this comes back to where Nicole, started the conversation about her session, was coming back to the use cases. Knowing a problem that you want to solve, and then being able to quickly act on it with these tools. And so, you can have these tools sitting in front of you, but if you can't think of something to do with them, then you're not going to get very far. So it comes back to this creativity the person has to bring and they need to identify a problem, and then they can perhaps use these solutions to solve it.
Yeah, I think it is, there's like, as with so many things that we see, there's kind of an art and a science behind all of this, right? So you have creative folks who are bringing the what and the why, right? And then the how, people are relying on us and our tools to give them the way to do this in a way that isn't, you don't have to be a developer or write code, but kind of going back to the real major topic of our session was the ingredients that you're putting into this, right? To get to the final result, and talking about, of course, yes, folks will bring their creative ideas and their use cases. But also, what the data foundation is such an important ingredient that people bring to the table here. And, as we were talking about, where do people start? That was kind of what, where we were grounding people, is start with your data and make sure that, it's a, maybe the most critical ingredient you have to build these things. And so, making sure that you have data governance around, what's being used, and that you're cleaning things up, and you're training your team consistently, right? So when we think about the pace of change that we're all going through, it's not a one and done thing where you train somebody on something and then, you're hands off for a year. The way things are changing, we really have to stay on top of enabling folks and making sure we're looking at things more regularly to make sure that foundation's solid so that we can move fast.
One of the things that I'm excited about as it relates to that topic, we mentioned our data hub a little bit earlier, is that, the idea there is to connect all of our applications together. And then if an association has other applications, to allow them to connect those together. And so once that data is all in one place, it all of a sudden provides an opportunity to use that to clean up the data. So you can essentially clean the data in the canonical model, and then push all that fixed data down to all the solutions. So you can get, consistency, get rid of dedupes. And of course, if we can apply some AI tools to make that easier for ourselves, we can use those tools to improve our data. And then ultimately, as where you're going with this, is that once the data is then corrected, then you can do the outward things related to maybe personalization or automation around things you're trying to drive your members to do, because now you have data that you can trust. So it's interesting how that process by what we're pursuing is actually creating a virtuous model that it'll help us fix the data, and then which sets us up better for our clients to actually then act on on it with these newer tools.
Yeah, that's incredible. And part of what we talked about in the session too was sort of this evolution of data management, right? And data management tools, sort of starting with what we all know as relational databases and moving through, then came data warehouses, then came these customer data platforms where you're starting to bring all of that together. And now we've evolved into these new tools like what you're talking about, Rob, where we have the ability to have more transparency into our data, and we can use it more effectively by bringing different sources together, and using analytics on that and pushing that information to other systems in ways that we've never been able to before. So it's really exciting.
The thing that interests me the most about the Momentive Data Platform and sort of that strategy that we have laid out, sounds like at ASAE, the kind of underlying model. So all of associations and I think I see this as part of cleaning up data, right? From a Momentive standpoint, this is us cleaning up data. All of our products and all of our solutions that we have, they sort of intersect at associations and nonprofits. And there is a data model that really represents the business of associations and nonprofits. It really represents what is at the core of those businesses. And so those things kind of match amongst all of our products and all of our various solutions. And so having a unified way to see all of our products with the same sort of data model gives us that flexibility to connect things together in a way that's seamless to either the customer or the customer's member. And that's a step in cleaning the data up. But the next step, the next evolution, is building things on top of that can serve particular purposes for those customers or those customers' members. That might be, I think we've talked about having AI agents working on top of that, right? So that we're able to actually task those agents with outcomes, and they're going to work towards it, and not I prompt you to do everything, but you sort of self-iteratively prompt yourself to keep continuing towards your end goal, which might be a very high-level goal, like improve retention by 15%. That's a very high-level goal. There's probably not a way to prompt in 2,000 characters to a LLM to get it to do that for you. But if you have the LLM set up on a loop where it takes a step and it figures out what the next step is, and it takes that step and then figures out what the next step is. That's an agent. That's what when people say agentic AI, that's what they're talking about at the end of the day. So it's that recursive process of trying to solve a problem. And as humans, we work that way too, right? At the end of the day, like we don't look at the problem of improve retention by 15% and we're like, oh yeah, I know how to do that right away. No, it's we come up with a strategy. We maybe get halfway through that strategy and realize it's not working, and we start over and we come up with a new strategy. And it's that thinking process that really turns LLMs into agents. And that's the iteration that we're all headed towards now. And you see it already, right? You can go to use Teams as an example. You can go into Teams right now and create a Copilot AI agent and give it a high level goal, and have it go and do that. Similar with GitHub Copilot, which is something that developers on my teams use. They can ask it to do something very high level, and that might even go and edit source code for you and say, hey, do you think this is the right thing that I did? And you can kind of go back and forth with it. Those are the steps. I can't wait to see how they play out over the long term. I think it turns into sort of an exponential growth situation for all organizations, and to the point where we're kind of just expecting the like take this high level goal that I have and strategically execute on it. Like we're kind of just expecting those things to happen. I do wonder about the long-term impacts on everybody's ability to do those things, but at least in the near term, I'm pretty excited to see how that type of thing plays out.
Yeah, I think if you just think about even 3 months from now, 6 months from now, the conversation might be completely different just with how these things are coming along and how people are embracing it and using it. We're going to learn so much. And when you talk about the exponential growth, it's so exciting. It does sometimes feel overwhelming as well. But these kinds of conversations are so helpful in And part of what I love about this conference where we're at is that these association folks get to talk to each other and have conversations like this where they're like, okay, I'm not alone in, the wonder of looking at what's happening, but also like maybe we're not where we want to be, or I'm scared, or so. Yeah, this is great.
So Nicole, as we're kind of wrapping up here, I'm kind of curious, with Salesforce being such a leader in the technology space, and obviously you guys are doing a lot with Agentforce.
Mm-hmm.
Did you, were there any things that you sprinkled into your session that, about what, you folks are up to that you feel is going to be really providing value to all of our clients and the organizations that are part of ASAE?
Yeah. As you were talking about Data Hub and just the concept of bringing data together, we talked about that and how important that is to empower something like Agentforce. And we did talk about Agentforce and how you build agents within our platform right now, which is using natural language, right? It's not using code. And we talked, you can use code if you want to. Go. But most of us aren't doing that, and we still want to take advantage of this. And so we shared some examples of use cases for different types of agents that we've talked with other organizations about or have thought of that might be really helpful in the association space. And we shared the different types of agents too. So we have assistive agents that are helping your team internally, right? And then what we call service agents, that are agents that you can put on your website or your community portal or, wherever you would like, that are interfacing with your members or other folks that are coming to learn about your organization. And, a lot of the conversation around that was that those feel a little scarier, right? Because they're external facing and it feels like you have less control. But just as Jake was saying, that building an agent is an iterative process too, and testing them and sort of monitoring what you're getting from them and determining the guardrails that you want to put in place. We talked a lot about giving instructions to an agent, not only about what it can do and the data it has access to and all of that, but the things that you don't want it to do. So as I have been sort of building agents myself, I have found that I think really, it's very easy to think about what you want an agent to do, and less, at least natural for me to think about the guardrails I need to put in place. But as you start testing these agents and see what's coming back, which is pretty fun actually, to see, as you're iterating and building on these, you sort of identify, okay, I need to tell it not to pull random facts from, the web, to only use our knowledge base or our website. So we talked a lot about that and just sort of the evolution of how this is going to look in associations as they start to embrace this and use it for more use cases that we probably haven't even thought of yet.
That's great.
Yeah, since we're sort of closing out here, I would say one thing that I advised in 2024 and the beginning of 2025 to associations through the Momentive user conference was, there is a scary word that's been kind of circulating since you might consider it scary. You might consider it a great opportunity too, depending on how you look at it. But since about mid 2023, when late 2022, we saw the big rise of ChatGPT, about mid 2023, we saw this new form of engineering come up called prompt engineering. And so that's the scary word or the opportunity, depending on how you look at it. There's a ton of information out there about prompt engineering. In fact, you can go and probably ask an agent on one of the various LLM sites, probably including Agentforce, about what prompt engineering is and to teach you about it. It can be very deep and complex, but also the beginnings, or I'd say like the 101 level knowledge about prompt engineering is super approachable for everyone and anyone. And so if there's one recommendation to make, it would be to look into prompt engineering, and that will equip you to really understand how to get the most out of LLMs and agents and whatever iterations continue to come up. That is the number one skill to kind of work on to to really get the most out of it. And you do not need to know how to code. You really don't even need to know traditional things about being an engineer. It is a term that really describes being able to articulate what you want from an LLM in natural language.
That's great advice, Jake. I agree.
Well, Nicole, it's been a fantastic conversation. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet with us here. And that has
thanks
been
so much.
absolutely. And that has been another episode of the Beyond Membership Podcast.